Hey everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're here for this devotional explainer, which is brought to you by our good friends at the UNFIJ in Jesus team. Today, we're going to uncover a really powerful story that's been hiding in plain sight.
We're diving into Genesis chapter 5. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Isn't that just a long, kind of boring list of names and ages? And yeah, at first glance, it can seem that way. But I promise you, hidden inside this ancient genealogy is an incredible story about where we come from, the real consequences of sin, and the amazing hope of a life that can actually defy death. This is literally the first family tree, and it tells us a lot more about ourselves than you might think. So the chapter starts by grounding us in this foundational truth. Humanity was made on purpose, male and female, in the very likeness of God. You see, our identity wasn't something we had to figure out or invent. It was a gift given to us by our Creator. This is the starting point for everything, a perfect design straight from a perfect God. All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we're going to look at Adam's broken legacy. Then we'll feel the relentless drumbeat of death that echoes through the chapter. But right in the middle of all that, we find this amazing exception, a guy named Enoch. His story will help us understand God's patience and the promise of rest. And then we'll wrap it all up by talking about how we can apply these lessons to our own walk with God today. Okay, first up, Adam's broken legacy. This is all about how a fallen nature got passed down, and believe me, this is where the story takes a huge turn. Now, check this out. There's a subtle but really profound shift in the language here. The Bible is very clear. Adam was made in the likeness of God. But then, after the fall, it says his son Seth was born in the likeness of Adam. That tiny change tells a massive theological story. It means Adam, now a fallen man, passed his own broken, sinful nature onto his kids. You know, this is the core idea of original sin. It's not that we're sinners just because we do bad things. We do bad things because we're born with Adam's sinful nature. And this isn't just some Old Testament idea. The Apostle Paul really drives this home in 1 Corinthians. He writes that just as Adam was earthy, from the earth, fallen, so are all of his descendants. We all inherit that same nature. And that leads us straight to the central theme of this whole chapter. Which brings us to our second section, the drumbeat of death. This is the unavoidable, inevitable consequence of that fallen nature we were just talking about. So the chapter begins this really somber, rhythmic pattern. We see Seth, who came from the godly line, lived an incredible 912 years. But the verse ends with 4 final, inescapable words. And he died. And the drumbeat continues. Enos lived 905 years. I mean, what an amazing lifespan. But the outcome? It's exactly the same. And he died. You can almost feel the weight of this phrase like a tolling bell over and over again. And one more time with Jared, 962 years. And the final verdict is completely unchanged. And he died. It didn't matter how long they lived or how godly they were. None of them could escape the curse. This is a perfect illustration of what Paul explains so clearly in the book of Romans. Through one man, Adam, sin came into the world, and death came through sin. And because of that, death spread to every single person. Genesis 5 is basically the historical record of this spiritual reality playing out generation after generation. But just when the pattern seems completely unbreakable, when it feels like all hope is lost, the story pivots. And that brings us to section 3, the exception of Enoch, a man whose entire life was a walk of faith. So after hearing that tolling bell again and again, and he died, the Bible kind of pauses and asks this silent but incredibly powerful question: is this it? Is death really the end of every single story? And the answer is this stunning, hopeful no. Just look at this verse about Enoch. It doesn't say, and he died. It says he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Enoch completely bypassed death. He is the great interruption in this long, sad genealogy of death. He's like a blazing signpost pointing to another way. So what does it actually mean that he walked with God? Well, this wasn't just some one-time spiritual high. The Hebrew verb here implies a lifestyle, a repetitive, continual, moment-by-moment intimacy with God. He literally lived his life in sync with the Creator, even as the world all around him was just getting more and more wicked. The book of Hebrews gives us the key. It says it was by faith that Enoch was taken up. It was his faith that led to a life that pleased God, and because God was so pleased with him, he experienced this miraculous translation. So here's the crucial takeaway. Faith leads to a walk with God, and a consistent walk with God pleases him. And the hope we see in Enoch's story carries us right into our next section, patience and a promised rest. It's all about how God is working his plan, even in the waiting. Okay, now let's look at this number, 969. That was the age of Methuselah, who was Enoch's son. He was the oldest man who ever lived. But you guys, his long life was so much more than just a biological marvel. His name is believed to mean, when he dies, it shall be sent. And get this, the very same year that Methuselah died was the year the Great Flood was sent to cover the earth. So his nearly 1,000-year lifespan was this incredible symbol of God's immense patience, giving humanity almost a millennium to turn back to him before judgment came. It shows us that God is so patient, but his judgment is also certain. Then, the chapter introduces Noah, whose name means rest. His father, Lamech, hoped that Noah would bring some comfort from the hard labor of farming the cursed ground. And while Noah did bring a temporary kind of rest through the ark, he was really a foreshadowing of a much greater rest to come. This ancient longing for rest finds its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus, who says, "Come to me, and I will give you rest." He gives that true spiritual rest to anyone who is weary. So all of this history, all these stories, they lead us to our final and most practical section. How can we take these ancient truths and actually apply them to our lives today? Let's talk about how to walk with God. Here are 3 key takeaways for us. First, just like Adam at creation, we have to recognize that our true identity isn't something we create for ourselves. It's a gift from God. Second, just like Enoch, we need to cultivate a lifestyle of daily communion with God through faith. It's not about being perfect. It's about a persistent daily walk with him. And third, just like the hope that was packed into Noah's name, we need to find our ultimate rest from the struggles of this fallen world in Jesus Christ and in him alone. So we'll end with this thought. Genesis 5 shows us a world that is marching to the relentless drumbeat of death. But it also shows us one man, Enoch, whose walk with God was a powerful, beautiful interruption to that rhythm. So the question for each of us is, in a world that's still marching to that same beat, how will your walk with God be the interruption? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. If you want to explore more devotionals and find resources to help you in your walk with God, we'd love for you to visit the You Need Faith in Jesus team.